before, we do want to invite as much invitation and interaction as possible, and this will be an experiential event. So I hope that you have come, at least for those of you who would like to participate in breakouts later. There'll be an opportunity to go and practice some of this, put this into practice, have your experience be the primary teacher here. So first of all, just out of curiosity, actually, we've heard from some of you already, and thank you very much for sharing about what inspired you to register today. And just curious, who here by show of hands is already a coach? Great, okay, cool. And again, by a show of hands, who's sort of new to coaching and exploring this as a possible next step for you? Cool, lovely, fab, great, a nice mix there. And also out of curiosity, who's already a Somatic, part of our community here at the Somatic School? A decent number as well, cool, lovely, fab. Okay, great. So today we're going to be exploring a powerful bottom-up approach to planning and decision-making. At least that's one of the applications for what is otherwise known as constellation work. And constellations is one of the skills that we train at the accredited diploma Embodied oriented coaching here at the Somatic School. Now, remember that this is a light version of this. So especially for those of you, I think some of you mentioned you've done some constellations training. We're going to be just touching on constellations today in terms of the experiential dimension, and a little introduction to that, because of course we haven't got time to go into the depth that we would on our course or our training here at the Somatic School. So we have an hour together to both introduce you to the skill itself, what it's all about, and then give you an opportunity to practice. I'm hoping today as well to give you a longer breakout than we normally would in the Somatic Shift series. So let's see how we get on. Famous last words. Let's see how we go. So one other thing to mention, I'm just about to pull up some slides. You will so rarely see us with slides at the Somatic School. This event is somewhat unlike the training here at the school, because we have a short amount of time, and I am indeed using slides to kind of give you a little introduction to some of these things. But normally our training is much more facilitative, small groups, maximum 17, very experiential, very much about kind of shared and individual sense making of the material, whereas this is a little bit more presenter style. So I just want to name and acknowledge that up front, that this is a little different to what other trainings you might experience here. I am Nathan Blair, and I am the founder of the Somatic School. Many of you here I've met before, and some of you are new, and some new faces in the space, and it's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm delighted that you're here, and I hope you enjoy the event today, and take something away from this event that enriches your life in some way, one way or another. I want to also share a little bit about the Somatic School itself. So we are the UK's, or we were, in fact, in 7 years ago, the UK's first ICF accredited somatic coach training provider. And we were, in fact, the world's first somatic coach training provider to be awarded the ICF's new level 2 accreditation, when that was launched some years ago. And just recently, we were recipients of an honorable mention for distinguished coach education provider at the ICF Impact Awards in 2024. We at the Somatic School draw on skills from a variety of established and respected modalities, particularly in the somatic space, body psychotherapy and somatic coaching at large, including modalities such as Hakomi, focusing, and constellations. And we're, as a provider, we're bringing these skills together appropriately in the context of a coaching conversation in one integrative and effective framework for coaches to use with your clients, whether you are new to coaching or already working with clients. But why these modalities? We'll share a little bit more. Of course, one of the modalities we're exploring today is constellations. So, for example, why constellations and why not another modality? And why Hakomi and why focusing? Why Gestalt? It's because these share a common thread and a shared unifying theory of change. And it's really that kind of, well, importantly, these modalities have a set of conditions or guiding principles that make them work, really. If those conditions aren't in place, the skills are as useful as a watering can with no water in it. And so this is what body-oriented coaching is all about. We're creating the conditions for systems to self-organize so that we can be effective stewards to the self-actualization of each and every person that we serve. At the end of the event today, as I mentioned, you're going to have the opportunity to speak with a course consultant to establish if the accredited diploma in body-oriented coaching is the right next step for you. Should you want to, you'll have opportunity to request a next step there. So before we begin officially and we get into the content of today, a question. Because as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be exploring a bottom-up approach to planning, decision-making. So a question for you, what are some of the challenges of conventional planning in your opinion? It's a bit of a leading question there, of course. I'm implying that there are challenges to conventional planning, but yeah, humor me. In your opinion, what are some of the conventional challenges to, the challenges to conventional planning? And feel free to unmute. You can also drop in the chat if you like, but yeah, I'd love to hear your voices in this space as well if you'd like to unmute.
Well, I have something.
Yeah, great. Ooh.
It's the loops of the brain going in circles.
Thank you, Thomas. So would you like to say like a little, I'd love to hear you say a little bit more about what you mean by the loops of the going in circles.
Well, if I'm planning or I have decisions to make, I can get caught up in the details and just run them all through my mind over and over again in a cycle without getting anywhere.
Great, beautiful. Thank you, Thomas. Fab, good example. Good to have you here. Thank you for sharing. Bryony.
Generally, it's a bit more of a linear process. So step one and then step two and then step three, you know, something that has to follow a line going forward.
Yeah. Linear, step one, step two, step three. And I'm imagining, correct me if I'm wrong, Bryony, that you're implying that maybe life doesn't always work like that. And is that right?
Yeah. Often there's 7 steps all at the same time.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Bryony. Thank you. I see that Claire says it assumes constancy. So similarly, Clara assumes that motivation equals efficiency. All right. Siobhan says exploring too many options can be one of the challenges. Stella, people being dysregulated as they even enter the planning stage. Indeed, yeah. And perhaps planning itself being a dysregulating experience for some. Denise can be overwhelming for some, exactly as I just said. There you go, Denise. Thank you. You beat me to it. Caro, end up doing nothing in the end. Vera, the pros and cons seem equally important. Indeed, yeah. Well, actually, Vera, we share a little bit more on that. Is that, do you mean the challenges and the benefits are equally important, or that pros and cons being equally important is a challenge in itself? I'm not sure what you mean.
Sometimes when I support people in kind of making decisions, the tool is like, let's make a pros and cons list. And sometimes the list could be equally long and like both things seem important or realistic or likely outcome. And so it just could stall the process a bit.
Right. So you just sort of get a little stuck there with an equally long list of pros and cons and not actually moving forward. Great. Thank you. Jane, very task-focused brain activity and more left brain than creative, right? And then interruptions derail the focus. These are wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing. Anyone else in the space just want to unmute and share if there was, just want to check. Yeah, Ramona.
Denial.
And what do you mean when you say denial, Ramona?
Denial that there is an issue. They want to help themselves. They want to get better, but they're in denial of the root cause of the actual issue. So with body-based, you know, you can kind of circumvent the mind.
Right, fab. Thank you, Ramona. Lovely. And then Ingrid, so something similar here, can override intuition and changes we'd maybe like to make along the way based on a felt sense. So feels like a good segue into where we're going next. So thank you very much, everyone. That was really fab. So this is what we're exploring today. We are, you know, with all of that in mind, what might be an alternative then, right, to our conventional methods of planning, of decision-making and strategizing. That's exactly what we want to explore today. And this is indeed why Constellations is part of the body-oriented coaching skill set, because if we are going to be coaching in a body-oriented way, why not have a more bottom-up embodied approach to planning, decision-making and strategizing? So today, discover the roots of systemic and structural constellations and their place in coaching. We're going to learn how constellations unlock systemic intelligence and reveal hidden dynamics as well. Explore structured constellations as a bottom-up approach to planning and decision-making, and then practice mapping options, priorities, and possibilities through embodied exploration. Finally, today, as part of that practice, we will be applying something called an options constellation to feel into decisions and uncover new possibilities. If this is your first introduction to constellations, we're going to do a constellations light experience here, but at least you'll walk away with something of a kind of first-hand experience of what we're talking about today. As I often say, it's all theory until it's felt. So that's what we're going to be doing. Now, thinking about what we said about conventional planning, I just want to share something here that comes from the Tao Te Ching, as illustrated by Cici Tsai. And this is a little quote in here. It says, "The way of nature is to win without contending, reply without speaking, have things come without calling, and plan without worrying." Now, that last bit there, the plan without worrying, really struck me when I first read that, because I often find this will be individual differences in my own personal biases, possibly being an ADHD card-carrying member of that club. That's planning has often been a source of anxiety and stress and that sort of thing. But I often find for many that's the case. For example, Richard Boyatzis and company did some research into coaching and found that if we begin planning too soon in a session, an example of that would be, for example, SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, for example. If we start to do that too early on in a coaching session, it actually activates the task positive network and the sympathetic activation system within our autonomic nervous system, closing people down to new possibilities, creative ideas, and each other. Conversely, sort of staying in the dream, the longing, the wondering, and that might perhaps what we might associate more with that right hemispheric style thinking processes. We actually activate what's called, what they refer to as sometimes as resonance, which is a parasympathetic activation, and the default mode network. And lingering in that space for longer during a coaching session and only coming to kind of grounding that in concrete next steps in the last 5 to 10 minutes of the session is what they suggested to get the most out of a session in terms of creative, innovative solutions and creative ideas and insights. So, but to take this a step further, constellations is a fascinating way of planning, because unlike our traditional top-down methods of planning, this is very emergent, bottom-up, and embodied approach. And planning without worrying is, I think, very characteristic of a constellated approach to planning. So let's break this down a little bit. And first of all, understand what on earth we're talking about when we say constellation. So here is the evolution of the constellation method, a little timeline. We don't need to sort of dwell on the history of this, but I think context is important. Here at the Somatic School, it's very important that we name our sources and we recognize we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. There's a lineage and a family, in a sense, of schools of practice that we belong to. So systemic constellations was developed, actually systemic constellations itself was developed, the work of Bert Hellinger, which you'll see in the timeline in that kind of early 1990s, and perhaps even a little bit earlier, his work in Germany. He was developing a new method of therapy called family constellations work. So in doing so, Hellinger was actually influenced by a number of sources that included his training in psychoanalysis, Gestalt, neurolinguistic programming, and family therapy. And so you can see some of the kind of the lineage there on the timeline as well. He was also, and this is important to mention because this is all often left out, but he was also strongly influenced by his exposure to indigenous ritual during his time as a Jesuit priest. He spent 16 of his 25 years in priesthood as a headmaster of a missionary school for the Zulu people in South Africa. And Hellinger actually incorporated his knowledge of indigenous ritual with Marino's method, as you see there on the timeline, of psychodrama, and Virginia Satir's method of family sculptures. And so this work of family constellations was then pioneered and was born and then pioneered within an organizational setting a little bit later by Dr. Gunther Weber and Professor Matthias von Kibert. And so that has then carried forward today, particularly in the UK. We have the Now Here consultancy during the 1990s. In the 2000s, we've got the whole partnership also to current day. So all of these various shoulders that we stand on doing great constellation work. And you'll see here on the timeline as well, structural constellations is something that we are going to be specifically looking at today, because there are in fact many ways to constellate. So what are constellations? It's probably an important question on everybody's lips here. Let's start to explore this. So constellations are an embodied practice that unlock our natural systemic intelligence and yield surprising new insights into different situations. A constellation begins with the creation of a three-dimensional map and the interactions and interdependencies between the members or elements of the map system create a field of information known as the knowing field. Some of this language might be new to you, some of this might be unfamiliar, and maybe even at this moment in time, a little alien. And so we're gonna break this down a little bit further. But for now, I just wanted to check in, maybe you could share in the chat, who here has heard of constellations before, been exposed to it, had some training in it? Yeah, okay, see some hands going up as well. Fab, good stuff. So, okay, cool. So let's kind of break this down a little bit. We've got two components of this, the map and the knowing field. And for now, just as a sort of starter for 10, when we start to introduce constellations, that's what we're going to explore a little bit of. So a constellation begins with the creation of a three-dimensional map. It's made up of, in family constellations, that'd be human representatives, or in structural constellations, that'd be place markers of the members, like maybe the people, or the elements, events, and abstract things like culture, money, market, things like that, in whatever situation or whatever situation or topic is being explored. Okay, so this spatial representative map reveals both the unconscious image that the client holds of the situation and the underlying dynamics that are at play. There are a number of different ways of mapping. Great. Just seeing a few bits in the chat there. Good. Okay, lovely. Yeah, number of different ways to map. Let's explore what those are. So one is using the imagination. So this is sometimes known as hypnoconstellations. And so we just constellate in our mind's eye, so to speak. Another is using post-it notes, post-its, objects, or figurines on the tabletop. You could use markers on the ground, which is what we're going to be practicing today. You can use people as representatives for the different elements, a very dynamic form of constellation, not dissimilar from social presencing theatre. Is also, we train that on our group body image coaching training, and that's similar to family constellations in some ways. And using a combination of people and markers is one of the other ways that you can map the system. Mapping the system, we'll have an idea. You're going to have a practice of this later, so you'll have an idea of what that actually looks like. But really, people get placed and positioned in a number of ways. Maybe they'll even the main point is, especially for the client or the coachee, in a coaching context, anyways, to kind of feel in to this sort of felt sense of rightness about where every element or member is oriented in relation to one another. Again, revealing the unconscious image that the client holds and the underlying dynamics to a degree. So the next part of this then, final bit of theory for now, before we introduce you to options constellation and then give that a go. I think we're making good time. How's everyone doing in terms of like information and pace? Give me a thumbs up if it's all, yeah, pace is good. And yeah, cool, lovely. Thank you. Good to know. So let's chat a little bit about this idea we call the knowing field. This is probably, perhaps for some of you, maybe one of the more novel concepts that we've explored thus far. A constellation, as we mentioned, is more than simply a three-dimensional map or a pattern. This is a practice that connects both the coach and client to, you might describe as an invisible field of information that's sometimes known as the knowing field. So the exact mechanics of the field's ability to hold information is really arguably beyond the scope of our current scientific understanding, but phenomenologically, in other words, through our direct experience, the experience of constellation is the same pretty much anywhere in the world, and across these different forms of constellating, we often see similar experiences emerge. By constellating an issue, individuals can tune into the information relating to different parts of the system and find out information that it might not have been possible to have received or been gain access to, in a sense, in other ways, even if the individual themselves is not a part, even if we're constellating a system that we ourselves are not a part of. And that's a curious element to this as well, that, you know, especially when you have human representatives who have really nothing to do with your, say, organization, team, or family, and yet information can be gleaned through the process that is directly relevant, seemingly, to the topic at hand. Now, there's many ways that we can try to understand this. You know, you might say that we are incredible meaning makers as humans, and that as we, you know, for our associative networks, we can kind of come up with all sorts of things that sort of connect the dots for us and make things relevant, even if they're not coming from a sort of a field of knowing as such. However, the British biologist and Cambridge professor Rupert Sheldrake actually explains this field phenomenon, describes something called the morphogenic field, or morphogenic field. I think I'm having a mind blank. I'm not sure which it is. If anyone knows, you could share in that chat. Morphogenetic or morphogenic field, I forget. But this is essentially what he describes as kind of collective memory that is held in the field and accessed through our bodies. Essentially, he refers to it as this organizing force that accounts for patterns of behavior in social groups, including things like schools of fish and flocks of bird, and the behavior of that you see sometimes in the more than human world too. One example, actually, speaking of the natural planet and examples of this field effect, could be the way that oak trees behave. Some of you may be aware, but the oak trees across the world limit the number of acorns that they drop. And then in a mast year, what's known as masting, so in a mast year, this happens at irregular intervals. And in fact, I think this year might have been a mast year, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not entirely sure. But in a mast year, oak trees that are spread across vastly different geographical locations all drop their acorns at the same time. And this phenomenon is really not understood at all, but this morphogenetic fields theory could well offer some explanation for how that happens. Fascinating as this is for the purpose of one-to-one coaching, however, the important thing to know is that for seemingly unexplainable reasons, new information often arises in constellations. So we are going to practice today holding space for that. Perhaps we're going to offer ourselves the liberty and permission to expect and hold space for unexpected insights to emerge. So we're going to be doing a particular kind of constellation, but let me just pause there because I've been speaking for a little while now. I just want to check in with everyone and see, is there anything coming up for anyone here that anybody would like to share? Any thoughts, reflections? Thoughts or reflections of what's been shared so far? Well, actually, your your silence is of great benefit because it means that we're going to have more time in the breakout rooms. So let's get into what we're actually going to be practicing. This is something called an options constellation. Okay, so options constellation is an example of a structured constellation. We're not going to be doing it exactly as the image is shown here. We're going to be doing a slightly reduced version of this. But this is a structured constellation, and structured constellations in general are great ways to break complex situations into a sort of set of simple elements, and each of which can be explored individually and in terms of their relationship with the other elements or the remainder of the map. These are very useful interventions for clients who are seeking to plan, strategize, explore options, and plot ways forward, in essence. And where traditional coaching approaches emphasize developing plans from what you might describe as kind of like a cognitive, mental meaning making standpoint, kind of more conceptualization, structured constellation draws on this distributed intelligence of the whole body mind. Here at the Somatic School, we use this term body mind to kind of point to the unification of body mind. So this means that clients can actually strategize and plan while staying connected to this emergent bodily wisdom of the felt sense. If you're curious about the felt sense, I believe we've introduced the felt sense in another Somatic Shift series session. We also went into quite a lot of depth into the field in another one of the sessions where we explored naming the third, which is another skill working with the relational field, but from a slightly different angle. Today, we're going to practice this by having only, so we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 floor markers. So what I'd like to encourage you all to do now, if you are going to participate, is see if you can find yourself some paper and a pen. Not everybody's going to get a go at this, of course, because we're not going to take it in turns. We're just going to have one person in each of your breakout rooms facilitate this. But if you can find yourself some paper and pens, we're going to use physical floor markers for this constellation, and you're going to have 5. So the way this works is I'd like to invite you to, you can actually, you don't actually have to write anything now, but later when you go out into the breakout rooms, we want to get 5 markers ready, which would be the me now, the desired outcome, option A, option B, and then other possibilities, or in other words, something else not yet imagined. We're gonna just skip the option A and B today, although traditionally this would be this kind of tetragram. So this kind of 4-part constellation is most commonly practiced with when it comes to options: option A, option B, option A and B, other possibilities. But today we're just going to do 3 of those for the sake of time. So desired outcome, option A, option B, other possibilities, and me now. Okay, so here's how it works: step 1, step 2, step 3. So take notes if you like, and if you're going to be coaching in this breakout room, of course, if you've already joined Constellation, feel free to, if you'd like to constellate or you'd like to be on the receiving end, you can choose whatever you want to do. So coach invites the coachee to lay out the markers intuitively, guided by their embodied sense of rightness. In other words, where does me now go? Where is desired outcome going to go? Where's option A going to go? Where's option B? And then other possibilities. I forgot to mention that at the very beginning of the session, and perhaps preferably before you come into the breakout, maybe you can try and think of a decision that you're trying to make in your life where there could be a variety of options. Option A and B can be something that you're already aware of as possible options, and then other possibilities will give you an opportunity to get a read, for example, on something that something else not yet imagined. And so as you come into the breakout room, first things first is, what is the decision we're working with? You could talk a little bit about your desired outcome for the decision. So, what would the desired outcome of a decision resolved or be? That's going to give you an idea of what the desired outcome looks like. Then you've got me now, desired outcome, and a set of options: A, B, and other possibilities. So step 1. Once you've done all of that, technically then, I suppose that's step 0. Step 1 then would be, or 0.5, step 1 then would be you're laying out the markers intuitively as you feel guided by that inner sense of rightness. That's not quite it. Let me move it like that. That feels just right. That kind of thing. Coach invites the coachee then to stand on. Let's begin, just for the sake of structure here in time. I'm going to give you this in a slightly more directive way, although normally you could be guided by the client. But here we're going to invite the coachee to stand on me now, then the desired outcome, and then the different options one by one. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to be a little bit more directive than we would normally be. But on this occasion, you can, of course, ask your client to go to where they feel drawn most. But otherwise, this also is a somewhat of a logical path that you can ask your coachee where they feel drawn most, if you like. Otherwise, me now, desired outcome, and then each of the different options one by one. Option A, option B, other possibilities in whatever order. Final step, coachee reports from the felt sense. So so what does that mean? It means essentially the person standing on the markers is going to name whatever comes up. I would invite you, and here is here's one of the conditions that we spoke about. Two things here. First of all, there's a certain spirit at embodied coaching that I like to kind of summarize as almost treat everything as potentially relevant. So as coachee, leave nothing out, even an itching, on your an itching back, or kind of like the sense of like a heavy feet, or suddenly just a kind of sweaty brow, or a kind of tingling in your fingers. Okay, but similarly, it could be a really random thought that you have, a memory that just suddenly spontaneously emerges. And what I encourage you to do, coachees, and coaches encourage your coachee just to report those things as they arise. The other thing I would really suggest, and I know at risk of information overload here, I do think it's an important piece, which is I'd encourage your coachee to step off the marker when they want to talk with you directly as a coach, not reporting from their experience on that marker. So if they want to say, oh, you know what? If they're talking about a different marker and their experience on a different marker, you might invite them to step off the current marker that they're stood on. And then when they're ready, step back onto that marker and report. And when I say marker, I mean the piece of paper with the piece of writing on it. And standing on that marker, then reporting from their experience directly. And coach, for now, I would actually invite you, perhaps, although we've said ask questions to help them, I would say actually, coach, maybe just reflecting back what you hear the coachee saying for now. No need for many questions in this instance, perhaps just reflecting back, what you hear them saying. If something comes for you in your own body experience spontaneously, you can offer that, see if it's of interest to the client, and if not, let it go immediately. But yeah, we're just going to reflect back we hear. Everyone following so far, step 3 is the most dense of them, but everyone kind of clear on what we're doing so far? Can I just see you guys show of thumbs? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, perfect, cool, lovely. Okay.
Nathan, can I just clarify? So when they're talking about the markers, then to step, or when they're making, I forgot when they should be stepped off.
Stepping off the marker would be, okay, I'll just do a little bit of role play. Imagine I've stood onto a marker and I say, okay, and I'm just taking a moment. Wow, this is very different from the last marker I stood on. That might be speaking about another marker. They might say, wow, this is really, I'm very aware that here my hands feel really heavy. And it's almost like my eyes want to close. And I have this sense of like, I'm like kind of wading in quicksand here. And then if they were to say something like, that's so different from the other marker. In the other marker, I was feeling like bright and this and that. And so for that moment, if they want to say to you something like, it's a little hard to describe, but like if they wanted to say something like, do you know what, for now, for simplicity's sake, maybe we'll leave that bit out. For now, for simplicity's sake, let's just let somebody stand on a marker, share what comes up, and then because we've only got a short amount of time anyway, we'll let them kind of move on to the next piece. I'm struggling to think of another example of that. It could be something like, like when you would invite them to step off the marker, it could be something like, oh, I know. Let's say they just start telling you a story about something that's sort of unrelated to their experience on the thing. So they just start saying to you something like, yeah, actually before the session, XYZ, and I was thinking about bringing this topic. And then, so at that point, right, they're just having a conversation and we just kind of want to invite them to step off the marker so that when they're stood on the marker, they're speaking from their read of the marker, they're speaking from the experience. And then in a sense, okay, a simple pithy way of saying it might be when they're speaking from experience, from their experience on the marker, they're on the marker. If they want to speak about the marker or any markers or anything else that's going on, kind of about it in a more general terms, maybe stepping off sort of thing.
Nice.
I hope that helps for now. It might be a little bit.
Great.
We could, okay, cool.
How many markers should we have?
Say again?
How many markers should we have? Hello.
We're going to have desired outcome, me now, option A, option B, and then other possibilities. It's 5 in total.
Right.
Great. Okay, lovely.
Okay.
You are so welcome. So we are going to just give you a little overview of what this is again. So remember, coachee creates the markers for me now. Option A would be other possibilities, desired outcome. Step 1, coach invites coachee to lay out the markers intuitively, guided by their own embodied sense of rightness. Step 2, coach invites coachee to stand on me now, then desired outcome, then the different options one by one. And then coachee reports on each of the markers as you're stood on each of the markers from this felt sense, this what's kind of coming up for you. And the coach is going to reflect back, helping the coachee move to the next marker whenever they're ready to kind of keep the flow of the session going. Great. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I forgot to put the slide in. Okay, yeah, just a quick thing then before we actually go into breakouts. We're going to go into breakout rooms in just a moment. But to learn more about enrolling on the accredited diploma in body into coaching, you can go ahead and type in a yes into the chat now, especially if you're not staying for the breakout rooms. And then Caro, our course consultant, who is here today, in fact, so Caro's here on screen. They will reach out to you with next steps and about how you might go on to discover the steps to becoming a body-oriented coach. For now, then, we're going to get into this options constellation. We're going to do it one way. So I'm actually going to put you in groups of 3 or 4, but only 2 people are going to be working together. Okay. So I just want to make sure that each of you have a partner and you get to see something. So one person's going to designate themselves to be coach. Another person's going to volunteer to be the partner or the coachee. First, agree what the topic is, what's the decision you're trying to make, and what are some of the options. Get those markers written down, and then coach facilitating this process like we just shared, steps 1, 2, and 3. I would like to give you 20, yeah. My suspicion is that you might not get through the full constellation today. So be mindful of your time. I think we're gonna send you out and bring you back just at the time of the end of technically the end of the event, and then we'll kind of hold people here for the kind of not hold people here. I'll keep the room open, excuse me, for whoever wants to do like the after hours and additional Q&A. But I think we'll do like a full 17 minutes, not a very long time to constellate. So be mindful of the time, how long you spend on each of the markers. You don't need to spend very long to get a little bit of read on it, and then moving from one to the next. Once you've finished, and as time's kind of wrapping up and drawing to a close, I'd like to invite you to kind of just bring the coachee back to have a little conversation about what insights they've had so far, and just kind of close up that conversation. And that's how you'll kind of end the time together. Yes. So yeah, we're going to be constellating. Thank you. Great question, Ramona. You're going to be constellating the coachee's desired out, the decision they're trying to make, the desired outcome for that, and the options. Yeah. If you want to do a constellation, you might choose to be the coachee in this instance. If you have something you'd like to constellate. Okay, cool. All right, let's just check. Anyone got questions about what they're actually doing? Okay, fab. I'm so delighted because we're going to go out now. We're going to have, I'm going to give you 17 minutes anyway. We'll just go 1 minute past the hour. If anyone needs to leave on the dot, of course, you can leave early. And like I said, you'll be in groups of 3 or 4. So choose who wants to be coach, who wants to be coachee, etc. Opening the rooms now. We'll see you back here in 17 minutes. So welcoming you back. I was minded to just bring you back just before the end of time. So I would imagine that some of you who didn't get a chance to complete your constellation, that would make a lot of sense, but hopefully you had a flavor of it. And, you know, you can actually constellate alone. So if you were a coachee, you could continue. If you've left the floor markers in place, you could continue after the event, should you want to. Let's take a moment here. I'll just say again, actually, briefly, let me just put up this slide for anybody who might need to go. And then I'd love to hear from you and hear some reflections on that breakout. So just this one again, if you would like to continue exploring and you'd like to learn more about enrolling on the accredited diploma Embodied coaching, you could go ahead, put a yes in the chat now. One of our course consultants, probably Caro, will follow up with you. In the meantime, I would love to hear from you, each of you, or any of you who would like to share on your experience there. I'm mindful some of you might need to go, so fair enough. Anybody want to share on your experience? A little foray into constellations. Clara, I see you're unmuted, but I don't know if that's just from the breakout you were just in. And
yeah, that's just from the breakout.
Yeah, I will share a bit because then I have to rush if it's
sure.
okay.
Yeah.
So I was the coachee. I think it was, even though it was very, very, sorry, it was very, very rushed because like it was a rush process. So we didn't have time to like go through all the markets and everything. It's, it was quite a strong physical experience, like the shift in energies and even like the desired outcome, like being physically in there. I felt it quite strongly.
Yeah, fab. Thank you, Jack. And I think if all you took away from it was not necessarily a resolution through the process itself, but what you took from it was that experience that you could feel on a floor marker quite strongly.
Quite strongly, yeah.
Experiences. Yeah, that's a wonderful takeaway from this. So fantastic.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Great. Stephanie said, beautiful to witness. You felt your heart being drawn into the process. That's beautiful. Lovely words. Anyone else? Ben? Oh, you're unmuted, Ben.
I'm unmuted, so I'll go ahead. I really appreciated the input from the coach. I felt like there's just moments where I felt sort of stuck, like, what do I do next? And in one case, she just suggested turning around and seeing like where I'd come from the process, and I could feel a very strong sense of pull of something that was sort of off the constellation, but was affecting all of it. So
cool. Awesome, Ben. That's great. Yeah, good stuff. Sounds like some good experiences happening in the breakout rooms. Thank you very much for sharing that, Ben. That's wonderful. Anyone else before
we had a great coachee who was very, you know, like aware and very eager to work. It was really, and it was obvious. His state, it was obvious to me, and I am aware of the strength of constellations, how they are strong, and the strength of the field, how fast it gives information. And I mean, it was really nice trying with Thomas. Thomas was a great subject.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so so Tracy loves the physicality of moving around and going into the felt senses and see how that can really help make decisions. Wonderful, good stuff. So hopefully you've got a sense. I would love to hear from some more of you. And if you want, we're going to kind of officially close here. No, we've already gone over just by a couple of minutes, but we'll officially close here, and then we'll do the after hours. Great, Pavina. Yeah, we'll do. And so just to say, I hope some of you have a sense of how there's an alternative method for doing planning, decision making, exploring various options for kind of next steps. And this is a bottom-up, embodied, more intuitive method, you could say. And it's not to say that we do this at the complete how would you say, and then disregard or do away with our conventional planning methods, but it can be very complementary to them. And, you know, this is not only in a coaching space that this is relevant. The Somatic School, we constellate, we have we have a particular meeting annually where we create the plan for the school for the coming year. Okay, so at the end of each year, we do a kind of a business plan essentially, and we constellate the whole thing. So we're doing that, and strategic business meetings. That's another application of this. So just to share that with you. For now, I just want to throw a few things up on the slides, just to mention that this is one of the many body-oriented coaching skills within the body-oriented coaching skill set, all drawn from various established and respected modalities, all together in one framework specifically for coaching. Coaching is distinct from some therapies. If you're aware of the egalitarian, person-centered, partnering, co-creative approach that is coaching, then that's what we're talking about here. And if you want to find out more about the Somatic School, you can find out here on our website, on LinkedIn, Facebook, Substack. If you scan there, you'll be able to come along to one of our free introduction to body-oriented coaching events, where you can learn more about the training here, and ask your questions. It's a very, very, it's a 2-hour event, and it's an opportunity to kind of deep dive into an introduction to body-oriented coaching and the actual training itself. So you can scan that QR code there for that. Again, once more, there's the little message here. If you want to drop a yes into the chat because you'd like to speak with Caro, then of course go ahead and do that. I can see Pavani, let me see, somebody had, yeah, Pavani, you put a message in the chat there, so thank you, noted. And then you can also book a call with course consultant directly here.